Stareable Fest 2021 is a 4-day celebration of innovation and independent streaming series. We're a creator convention, bringing you the most relevant production workshops, panel discussions, giveaways, and an industry marketplace connecting the next wave of indie series to execs at AMC Networks, Blumhouse, Disney TV Animation, and more. We're a festival, screening your new faves, from rich fantasy to absurdist comedy, hosting an award ceremony, and several parties to kick it with your fellow fans and creators alike.
Hello there. Welcome to today's workshop. I'm Matt Allard. I'm the Director of Strategic Alliances with Dell, and happy to have you all here for our session on virtual production and game engines when worlds collide. So we got a really great panel conversation coming and a really great panel, but just a couple of quick comments. We're happy to be here as a co-sponsor of Stareable Fest. It is the premier annual indie TV and web series festival in the United States and the new home for digital creative talent in the TV industry. Stareable Fest honors the year's best content and provides a space for the next generation of creators to connect with industry executives, grow their network, learn new skills, and build community. So Dell Technologies is a co-sponsor along with our partner NVIDIA. Obviously, we make workstations and monitors and exceptional graphics cards to help power creators like you. We'd also like to thank the other sponsors for Stareable Fest and partners. That includes AMC Networks, Disney TV Animation, Rizzle, and Just for Laughs for making Stareable Fest 2021 possible. So, what I want to do next is welcome our guests and our panel. Let's bring on Andrew MacDonald, Tim Hatch, and Will McMaster. There's Andrew. Hey, Andrew, how's it going?
I'm good.
Excellent. And Tim. Hey, Tim, and there's Will. All right, we're all coming in. So, obviously, the plan here is to talk a little bit about virtual production and the process, and really about a specific production that all of us have been involved in. But let's start to get to know everyone on the panel a little bit first. So I'll ask each one of you to take about a minute to introduce yourself, why you're here, who you work for. So Andrew, why don't we start with you?
Sure. My name's Andrew MacDonald. I'm in Toronto right now. Nice fall weather. Orange leaves. And I'm the executive producer and creative director on the SurvivormanVR game, which is what we'll be discussing around that product. And I work for Cream Productions, which is a Toronto-based film and TV and gaming now production company.
Awesome, and kind of an innovator all around, Andrew. I know we've worked on a number of projects, and you've got a lot of interesting things going on, which I hope we'll get into in the panel. Cool. All right. So Tim Hatch, would you take a moment to introduce yourself?
Hi. Yes. So I'm currently working for a company called APG Media. My background was originally at a communication media degree from Manchester University with a focus on illustration and animation. I then I worked for BBC Northern Ireland and also film background as well from the Film School of Northern Ireland. Upon arrival in Canada, I started doing a lot of work in the audiovisual world and broadcasting and again film. From there, I went into a sales role where we have eventually morphed, doing a lot of LED on camera work for production, film and broadcast. Eventually, that naturally morphed into virtual production, and we have custom engineered an LED tile specifically for virtual production's high demands and working with Unreal Engine.
Awesome. Yeah, and we'll talk more about the importance of that and the importance of those LED panels when we get into the details. Excellent. So, and last but not least, Will McMaster. Will, do you want to give yourself a quick introduction?
Sure. Hi, everybody. So I kind of come at this from a bit more of a game engine sort of VR background. So I work for a company called Occupied, and I'm a technical director and a technical artist. And so my domain primarily is in real-time graphics, primarily for VR, but also have dabbled with Cream and Andrew in doing virtual production stuff. The other thing that I specialize in is 3D scanning of environments, and so we'll get into more of that a bit later. But yeah, that's what I do in a nutshell.
Okay, cool. So I'm gonna throw the question out, and I think it's probably either Will or Andrew, but let's give this audience a little bit more information of, okay, what is virtual production? What is it, and why would you use it over something like a traditional VFX workflow? You want to take a swing at that one, Andrew? Oh, you're muted, I think.
Hi. Yeah, so virtual production, and I'm going to assume that it's a film festival full of filmmakers, and they have a little bit of an understanding. But it is a way of replacing special effects you would place in a green screen and do a lot of work in post production with your post production happening live on the green screen. So in this case, it is turning the green screen into a wall of monitors that play the image of your environment that you want to shoot your foreground in, which could be humans, whatever you want to film. And it's only become possible recently with the advent of a technology that was originally designed to capture people, like motion capture. You put the little balls on your suit and you move around, and you've got an array of cameras that can triangulate and capture all that motion. So now you can put those little balls on a camera, and now you can track the camera, and you'll know exactly where it is in a space, and you feed that information to your asset, your background displayed in the green screen, and it does all the calculations and sort of like changes the perspective and backgrounds as you move the camera. And we're all familiar with The Mandalorian. It was sort of made famous in The Mandalorian, but I believe there was a sci-fi movie with George Clooney that was one of the first sort of work. I can't remember the name of that film though.
Yeah, and I would say like there's some other technology elements in here that has made this possible and popular lately. So I think definitely the positional sensors. I think Will can go on, I'm sure, about the real-time graphics support, because getting to the point of having real-time photorealistic graphics is a really big part of this, the enabler. And of course, the kinds of LED walls that are the size and scale that you can use in a production environment. I think all of those things are kind of the technology advancements that made it possible. So I'll just follow that up with one other question, Andrew, and then we'll kind of get to the others. Why virtual production? Obviously, you could do this with the traditional green screen approach. For the filmmakers that are here, can you speak a little bit about why and when you might choose virtual production over a more traditional approach?
Well, for me, as you mentioned earlier, as an innovator, I'm like, let's try this. This is cool. So,
Right.
there are a whole manner of reasons. I mean, from the affordability of not flying to some remote location or wherever you wanted to make this background to actually just put it in a studio and keep everything local and travel that way, like the holodeck. To preserving something like, for example, you could take your set and scan it and make a 3D model of it. So should some reshoots need to be done down the road and your location's blown, you can do that in a studio. So yeah, I mean, and Mandalorian's a perfect example, because they were able to save the budget on creating like all these sci-fi sets, building them in a game engine and putting them up. So yeah, and in our specific case with what we're discussing here, is we kind of did it because we could. So we're actually building a VR game, and the assets in the game are already done. So we're not building them for virtual production. We just have them, and we had this amazing opportunity, which I think we'll get into, to shoot on a virtual production stage. So we took our character, our host of our celebrity in this game, and physically brought them to a virtual production stage and took the assets and put him in the game, literally. So that's a really good hybrid opportunity that we had.
That's probably a good tee up. Maybe we should ask our Sarah to show the behind the scenes video so people can get a sense of what this production was like and what was happening. We can roll that, Sarah, if you would.
Hey everybody, I'm Les Stroud, aka Survivor Man. This is the scene of something we're shooting right now for the new SurvivormanVR. So this is actually basically the promo shoot that we're doing at this point, but it's still a lot of fun. And we've got an actual airplane Cessna brought in for the shoot, and the rest of it is movie making magic. Show them the scene.
What we're doing here at the SIRT studio today is virtual production.
Virtual production is basically a camera trick. And what it is an in-camera effect where a real camera is filming a foreground, and the background behind the real foreground, the background is a humongous wall of high-resolution, bright LED panels.
So now you've got these game assets, this mountain environment that we've set the game in that we can now project on this wall of monitors and track a real camera as a virtual camera, so everything all moves in unison, and you end up finishing your day with everything stamped in the camera, done, no post-production needed.
It's interesting because it's a combination of a 3D scan, which is kind of like a three-dimensional photograph of a real mountaintop, run through a game engine with real-time virtual production as a background, and then the foreground is actual real objects. So it's a really interesting mix between real and real-time graphics and real objects, essentially.
Speaking of real objects, Will, look what I got.
Oh, nice. So in the Survivorman game, there's a compass in the game that looks identical to this.
So we're taking advantage of the fact we have this opportunity with SIRT and APG, who have literally come in the day before and installed this brand new, super bright, state-of-the-art curved video wall. We at Cream just picked up some new Dell Precision 5820 workstations and got the NVIDIA RTX 8000 cards in them. And using Unreal's game engine, we now have the capability to drive a wall like this. We've got Les in town, and we're going to shoot some promos for the game using some of the game assets that we've built for the game being projected in these walls.
I think what really has me thrilled is the fact that it's finally happening. You know, Survivorman has been on air since 2000, actually, if you count the pilots, 2000, 2001. And always, every step of the way was the fact that, okay, should do a game. Even ventured down that road a couple of times. And it really took kind of teaming up with my old partner, Dave Brady, and at Cream Productions, and now Andrew, to say, you know what, let's actually make this happen. And so I think what excites me the most is the fact that it's finally, with a capital F, finally actually happening.
Cool. So I think a few things there that obviously are cool to see, but one of the things I want Will to kind of give us a little bit more background on, because I think we're talking to filmmakers here that may not have as much exposure to, you know, photogrammetry techniques, real-time 3D graphics. So I think just if you can help understand kind of what you're trying to achieve on set with the graphics capability, and maybe the kinds of skill set that's needed when you're trying to add this capability to a production.
Well, what we're trying to achieve on set is basically a seamless shot where you can't really tell that there is this LED wall behind the actual set and behind the props and all the other stuff. And so in order to achieve that, it's kind of tricky because the studio lighting has to be set up pretty carefully so that you are matching the light intensity that's coming off of the wall in the background. But then at the same time, the actual stuff that's being generated on the wall needs to look pretty realistic too, because you don't want it to necessarily look like a video game, even though it is running in a real-time game engine. You want the actual assets that are running in real time, the 3D assets, to look pretty realistic, because it's going to look kind of weird if you've got this real foreground and this kind of, computer gamey looking background. So that's what was kind of interesting about this particular production, is that we were using 3D scans as the background. So for those that don't really know what that is,
thanks. I was just about to ask. Yeah.
3D scan is basically a computer model that is generated from real places and real objects. And there's a number of ways you can generate a 3D scan of something. In this case, we used photogrammetry. And what that is basically taking thousands of still images of something and then throwing all those images into a really powerful computer. And then the computer generates a super detailed, super high resolution, photorealistic 3D model, which you can then put into a game engine or render it offline or do whatever with. So in the case of this production, we were using a 3D scan that was done of a mountain range in BC, I believe. And so that's what makes the actual, in this case, the production actually work pretty well, is that we've got this real asset to display on the wall in the background versus a more gamey sort of thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think, you can, for that content that's on screen, obviously you can do a reality capture using this photogrammetry technique, or just like they did in The Mandalorian, you can start with entirely CGI, created content that a 3D artist would create. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. So maybe you want to make a sort of alien landscape, and it's fully possible to do that using Unreal Engine. As long as your artists are good enough, you'll make something that is believable as a backdrop for real characters in the foreground.
Yeah. We're I say Dell's very interested in this whole area of virtual production. It's one of the reasons we've engaged with this team, and we're running another little video series with Hollywood editor Vashi Needamansky. And one of the things his 3D person did, which I thought was really interesting, is there's tons of available assets through Unreal's store or through other providers. So you don't even have to have necessarily an original creator. I mean, if you want original content, obviously you're gonna start that from scratch. But if you need some simple things, and they were doing, their example was adding spaceships, for instance. They were able to grab assets and they did some modification to make them unique to the production. But it was one of the ways to kind of quick start this. So I think one of the things that I wanted to make sure the audience takes away is that, while you guys are working in an amazing environment, the Sheridan SIRT Center, I think it's possible to do some of these workflows without the highest budget. You don't necessarily need a Mandalorian budget to do it. There's ways to kind of shortcut some of the process.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can kit bash things together in Unreal Engine. So kit bashing is basically taking a bunch of different 3D models from different sources and then putting them into a scene and arranging them. And something like the Megascans library enables that. So Megascans is a humongous library of surfaces and 3D assets that are all scans. So you can take a bunch of that stuff and throw it in there, and you can actually get a pretty good result out of it.
Yeah,
but then just to add that you don't actually need a very insane camera system or anything to create a 3D scan. You can actually create a 3D scan with your phone. That won't be very good, but you can still do that with your phones. You can generate this kind of stuff for virtual production. It doesn't have to be super expensive or super high budget.
That's what I wanted to get at. It's becoming more accessible because this kind of tech to scan things is becoming more accessible. But I wanted to add, though, as my background as a cameraman for 20 years before I got into this, as perfect as you want to go, Will, with the background, which is key, you kind of remember this, and Tim can attest to this, because this is part of the functioning of the wall. That wall needs to be out of focus. It needs to be a background that's slightly out of focus, because you can't really focus on the wall. If you focus on the wall, you'll get what's called foray, which is the door effect, and you'll start much crazy. So It has to be good, but you don't have to fight for the nitpicky perfect because it's going to be slightly soft.
Yeah, and that's a good point. We should get Tim into the picture here because we've talked a little bit about why virtual production. We've talked a little bit about the content on screen, on those screens, but we really need to cover the physical space, the screen itself, and what's important there. And so, Tim, I really like you to share a little bit with this audience about kind of what do you need to be concerned about? What is the environment of those screens need to do inside that environment to create a realistic production?
Yeah, so when it comes down to the actual physical technology itself, it's very easy, and a lot of DOPs who maybe are on the call can attest this, and probably Andrew as well. If you put your camera in front of poor quality LED, which could be an off-the-shelf product or some cheap product because you think, well, LED is LED, then you're not going to get the results that you want. And all the work that you've done in previs with Unreal Engine and so on, and all the other hard work with camera tracking that you've done will be all for naught. The importance of the technology in front of the camera is it has to have certain qualities, technical qualities. It'd be the same as your Dell computers. It's got to have a certain amount of power, a certain amount of juice, X amount of drivers in order to allow it to have that on-camera performance. Diodes have to be of the highest quality, color saturation, so your color gamut, color space has to be of the top quality, and also high brightness. Most of the tiles in the market that are getting put in front of cameras are only between 1200 and 1500 nit. We recommend 2000 nits, and that's the product that we put in front of Cream and Dell for your video game production.
Oh yeah, I can attest to that as a camera guy. I had done one other virtual production shoot prior to this, and the wall was not as bright. And the one thing that you'll find with a wall, if you get in front of them that's not as good, two things: the brightness and the fact that it's shiny. So if you're trying to light the foreground and you put a light right in front, the camera shine a light right directly at the wall, it just kicks right back to a highlight in the wall. So
yeah, that's
very
right.
bright screen, and I think, Tim, it's the blackness between the pixels being matte and sucking up.
Correct. It's a special. So it's a deep. Ours is regarded as a deep black panel. So basically, it's almost, I would describe it like a black hole. Whenever you put light on it, there is no reflection. It just disappears. Basically, it just gets sucked into it. When we did, comparing against other products that I think you got your cameras in front of as well, Andrew. Our product was the only one that didn't have any, reflection on it at all. There's zero reflection on the tile, which is perfect.
I was just a quick tip: if you are stuck in a wall that is not that good, what I had to do on the previous wall I shot on was cross-polarizing the light, which I'll just briefly describe as putting a polarizing gel on your light and your camera lens, and you can basically dial out any reflections using that. But it does lower your stop, so you limited options.
And so, Tim, I think one of the questions I have, and I don't know as I even know the nature of your business, is if you have a production or one of the filmmakers here that wants to have access to this kind of screen, is it something that you guys, is it a rental model? Is it a purchase model? What's your approach?
We actually do both. So the virtual production department, which is APG Media, which I started up right at this, about two and a bit years ago before COVID kicked in, is specifically designed to offer rental applications for film and broadcast industry with using virtual production, or if it's just an on-camera application as well. It could just be simple video playback as well without the camera tracking. Also we do full studio builds where we've custom rigging we've designed custom rigging systems as well, specifically for North American use, which are all certified and engineered properly. We also do that. So full studio builds with the LED. We'll advise on your workflow process as well, all the way from Unreal Engine, all the way through your camera tracking to the LED. The rigging bills, the electricity that you need in the facility to run everything. We do full turnkey solutions for both rental and new builds.
Awesome. Okay, very cool. That's I hadn't asked you about that, so that's I'm glad I did. So I think one of the things that on the content side, kind of coming back to you, Will, is real time. I think this whole solution is dependent on real time, high quality graphics, and that doesn't necessarily come without some effort or without some hardware, or a combination of some smarts in the way you prep that content and the right hardware driving it. Can you speak a little bit about that kind of workflow of how do you get to, something that's real time? And of course, I'm assuming it's a little dependent on how big of a screen resolution you're driving as well.
Yeah, so I mean, coming back to the 3D graphics side of things, the more complex a 3D model is, the harder it is to run it and render it in real time. So you have to try and find a balance between 3D assets that are properly optimized for real time and then also visual quality.
Right.
So you can't take a scene that's being built to be rendered offline, where it takes the computer 4 minutes to render a frame, and stick that same scene into a game engine and then tell it to run that same rendering 60 times per second. So you have to have some knowledge, or it helps to have some knowledge about how real-time 3D graphics work and how game engines work and how you prepare those types of assets for game engines. That helps a lot. Having said that, I think that it's actually changing quite rapidly because of Unreal Engine 5. So Unreal Engine 5 is not officially released yet.
Right.
Typically, these systems use Unreal Engine 4 as the game engine. But Unreal Engine 5 has a pretty amazing rendering system, which is somewhat magical, where you can actually literally throw in millions of polygons and crazy models, and it will render them all in real time with real-time lighting as well. So you can move all the lights around dynamically. And at first I didn't believe that this was possible, or it was some sort of big downside or some limitation. And there certainly are, but for virtual production specifically, I think that it will change it'll make it easier for people to just throw anything into the game engine and to have it run in a virtual production environment.
Yeah.
So you won't necessarily need to go through the difficult technical process of optimizing all these models and stuff. You should theoretically be able to throw anything into it and it will render it, more or less perfectly. You should, but it actually, I've used it quite a bit already, and it actually does work incredibly well. So that's part of the challenge, is like the real-time 3D graphics stuff. But I think that problem will largely be solved when Unreal Engine 5 fully comes out, early next year. That's going to help a lot.
Well, I think this is indicative of the conversation, which is, this is an area that's innovating very quickly, and the pieces are kind of all coming together very quickly, and it's becoming more accessible by more filmmakers. And I keep going back to, from a creative standpoint, this is not just about, special effects and science fiction movies and fantasy movies. I know the project that Cream took on was really much more. Yes, it's a game environment, but it's a realistic environment. A plane crash on in the Rocky Mountains or the Canadian Rockies. So, that to me is more more applicable to something like dramatic. And so, as a resource or a tool set for filmmakers, I find this kind of technology pushing into kind of more creative possibilities pretty exciting. So, Andrew, one of the things that this production, and I think some of your work has been in combination with the SIRT Center. Can you kind of give just a little bit of a voice to what Sheridan SIRT is, and how they've helped with this production? I would like to acknowledge that, of course. Yeah.
Sure. I actually just had a quick thought when you asked me earlier, like what would be the advantage of using virtual production. I should have mentioned that if you wanted to film your subject on the peak of a mountain, it's kind of expensive to fly up to a peak of
with the destroyed airplane. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So so SIRT. I'll give you a short bio here. My child might come home in the middle of this, but so my background is as a cameraman. So I've spent almost 20 years filming this kind of television. Not Survivorman, clearly, because he films himself, but Discovery, History, Travel, Nat Geo, that kind of stuff. So. And our company sort of made a foray into virtual reality when the first 360 video stuff came out, and I found myself setting that up at Cream, and that evolved into building games in Game Engine. And one of the things we're doing with that is sort of modeling, our television model, which was with, for example, Survivorman. It's a host-driven show. You know the guy. The familiarity is the person. We had another show called Wild Things with Dominic Monaghan, who's one of the hobbits from Lord of the Rings, and he would run around poking snakes and spiders all over the world, where they're picking up where the crocodile hunter left off, really. So that's sort of the genre of television I'm in. So in building games, we kind of went, hey, what if we took Les Stroud, Survivorman, which was Cream's show. We co-produced it with Les years ago, and turn the TV show into a game. You're in the game. You're now trying to survive like Les. So it became this necessity to make it authentic. That's one thing Les is adamant about, is that it's real. Like some of the other knockoff survival shows that came on after Survivorman were, I won't mention names, but I'm all by myself in the desert here, and it's like, no, you're not, because you're being filmed by somebody. So, but at least with Les, he was by himself, and there's a certain level of authenticity to his brand. So the game had to be authentic. So that's why we began with the scan of a mountain. We got that from actually a German company called Realities.io, who did it for a Canadian company out of Quebec. And it was to be based in the real world. But then we quickly discovered that making these scans gets expensive to fly all over the world and make these scans. So we started off doing a hybrid version. So back to SIRT. So part of what in my career for the past 5 years at Cream, we've been pushing this sort of innovation. And in Toronto here, or in Canada, we have a fairly decent round of sort of investment in innovation from the Fed. And that creates these programs that team up with the universities, and you get these sort of applied research clusters, like the SIRT Center, which is the Screen Industries Research and Technology Center. And Tim's got a similar way into that as well. We met through there. So they set up this sort of facility. It's at Pinewood Studios, which is a big lot here in Toronto, and they have a huge sound stage. And in there, it's like a playground for students to use new technology, and it's for the industry like us to come in and do applied research projects with students, so students get practical experience in the real world. And so we began a program about 4 years ago now to create a digital avatar, a new method of creating a digital avatar, which is kind of completely different from this talk, but fascinating as well. But what we did run into was Tim, and SIRT started getting into this virtual production stuff about 3 years ago, I believe. Wasn't it, Tim, you first set up? Oh, you mean
it started? We've first set up. Oh no, yeah, no, I'm off. No, it should be good. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah,
great. Delay between click of button and audio coming through. So we got involved right when people just started talking about Mandalorian. They were the first really to do it. Big Disney dollars, as I call it. Just throw money at it to fix problems, which is kind of where we started coming into it. And we brought our LED into SIRT to allow people to do, as Andrew's saying, to start testing, to do the research and development, and to really bring virtual production to the wider audience, and to allow the small, medium, large companies to get in front of that type of technology as well, not just the huge multi-billion-dollar, trillion-dollar companies. So that's where we came into it, and we donated LED at the start to allow people to come in and do that, and then that generally morphed by doing R&D on those screens. We actually went through all the major camera makes that you would find within film and broadcast to get the LED on camera. We backwards engineered what some of the issues are that actually appeared on Mandalorian. Scan lines on the imagery, archiving of imagery, not sufficient brightness, which we've already touched on. And we worked out what those technical qualities are, backwards engineered it, and then produced the tile. So the tile that was used on your production is the tile that was engineered specifically for virtual production, with work that we started putting in, 2.5-3 years ago, before actually taking delivery of the custom tile. So that's how we came into it with SIRT, and we're continuing to work with SIRT as well. And they have actually gone the same route, and they've got their own stock of that 2.6 tile that you used is actually coming in for them to continue doing the research and development.
Yeah, and they already had the mocap because you need two parts. You need the screens and you need the motion capture system. They have an OptiTrack there, so it's a beautiful playground, I must say.
And I think, I mean, I guess for the audience who, are filmmakers and, maybe aspiring to do the same, I think what's interesting here is the partnership between, the research center and industry, and being able to kind of get access to it. So I think a little bit of, sort of looking around in your environment, in your local area, to see if there's similar opportunities. It may be a way to kind of, get your feet wet on the whole virtual production space. We shouldn't go much longer without actually showing a bit of the piece. I know we have a part
The
of
rough cut.
A rough cut. It's a rough cut. Yeah. And we should talk a little bit before we take questions. I think we got about 5 minutes. I'd like to show that piece, and when we come back, we'll talk a little bit about how much in camera and how much post do you think you're going to be doing on this. So why don't we roll that piece, Sarah?
What if it happened to you? What if you found yourself in a real survival situation? Lost and alone. You think you could survive? You even know what you need to look for. Everybody thinks you can just pull a vehicle apart. It's not that easy without tools. There we go. If you work hard enough, you may find something that can keep you alive. And you know what to do? If I immerse you right into a survival situation, just like this, crash in the mountains.
Awesome idea, pulling that compass out. Now you can take a bearing, set a heading, get yourself up this mountain.
I'm Les Stroud, also known as SurvivorMan, and I'm inviting you to come into my survival simulation, to do what I've done for years, and to learn how to survive on SurvivormanVR, an immersive virtual experience. You think you can survive?
All right, so very cool. So it's kind of a mix of the stage live action shoot using virtual production and some game footage. So I want to make sure people don't confuse the two, because one's very clearly game footage. So I'd like to hear a little bit about the to what degree you're going to have to do. I mean, I think the aspiration of virtual production is it's shot in camera, but how much post are you seeing in terms of post-production work that once you got your shoot done?
Not much, to be honest. I mean,
cool.
We were again, like, virtual production is still for an indie studio, and we'll make no fib about this, really hard to achieve. Like, we have a unique situation here getting in with Tim, and
yep.
Because it's under the research facility, there was some incredible price quoted, I will say, I guess, for what it's really worth.
Yeah.
And again, also, it is a research facility, and it is the higher tech tiles, as I understand, than even the Mandalorian shooting on, but significantly less of them, because like they have a massive studio with a overhead as well. So we had a smaller wall. So now back to the DPing, because we were on a skimpy budget, we needed really a huge soft overhead source to give that ambient overhead light, but we were working with a small lighting package, and any camera people out there will see this little bit of shadow and another, like, across, like, soccer stadium shadow going on in some shots, which gives a lit look. So yeah, those are my own personal criticisms when I look at my work. But other than that, yeah, it was the CGI that we need after the fact is minimal to any. What I'm looking at trying to do is put in breath, which is an After Effects plugin now that's pretty straightforward, and a particle effect. It would be nice to have a little bit of, like, wind, snow blowing through the thing on a layer thing. So those are sort of minor effects. So most of it's there in camera.
Cool. And so yeah, you mentioned a couple of the tool set, your After Effects for visual effects. What's your edit done in?
We're cutting in Premiere, I believe.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And Will, obviously you said you used Unreal for your real-time environment asset creation. What were you using for reality capture and any manipulation, CGI sort of work?
Well, I was using a piece of software called Reality Capture,
Yep.
Most uncreatively named piece of software. That's to generate all the 3D scans.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, it's really the rest of it is just sort of a typical tool set for real-time 3D production. So pieces of software like ZBrush, Substance Painter to fix problems, and then it just all goes into Unreal Engine, and it's lit in Unreal Engine.
Yep. You draw the real time. So
I would actually, while we're on that subject, I don't know if we're going to do it next, Tim, but to mention that the asset itself. So that is, there's nobody here talking about or from that side of it. In this case, as I mentioned, it was Realities.io in Germany that had done the scan, commissioned by a Quebec TV production company. But that also specifically to doing it if you want to do a photogrammetry scan of a real place, like what we've just shown you, that would also involve flying out to the mountain ridge with a small crew with a stills camera to run around and photograph like everything, every rock, every snowdrift, and then fly a drone in circuits to get another angle and all that stuff, and then shoot a whole bunch of stuff outside to get like your skybox, and you end up with tens of thousands of photographs that get fed into reality capture, which is where we'll take it.
Yeah. Okay, so we got a question, and I want to take this question because I think it's a really great one. I know most of the guys here, they've been doing this for a while. While it's a new area, virtual production is new for everybody. Obviously you guys got a great deep experience. So the question is, if you're looking to do a first test project, how would you get started?
I can jump in on that one because that tends to be what we've been doing is startup projects.
Cool.
What happens, whether it could be, so within virtual production at the minute, you've got a very broad range of people that want to get in front of virtual production. It could be an actual VFX company who now, rather than working at the end of the process and post, they're now working at the beginning of the process. It could be a film company, a production company like Cream. There could be somebody who has a large film studio but doesn't have just the bricks and mortar as well. So the importance is it's the education behind what you should be putting your camera in front of is the first portion. As we've discussed, if you put it in front of a low quality LED, then your results are all going to be for naught, and you're going to get frustrated with it, and you aren't going to want to do it anymore. Then it's working out your workflow process, which Cream has done and Andrew did, where you've got your each section, you're gen locking everything. You've got the correct processors. We haven't touched on processors. Processors are incredibly important within virtual production on the LED side. The only one that really is doing what it should do is called Brompton. So we work with Brompton directly. That then actually plugs into your Unreal Engine, whatever, your Dell computers that are pushing your Unreal Engine. So everything has to be this very specific sequence. Everything has to be gen locked. If you get one of the elements incorrect, it's not going to run for you, which can be really frustrating. However, there's companies like ourselves and like Cream and so on who we've already done all the hard work for you. If you come to us with a project, then we can walk you through it and work with you to get it done. So that's what I would say to, as a starter. Not to put anybody off. It sounds complicated, but we've done it so many times. It's doable.
Yeah, that's a great answer, Tim. Any additional pointers, Andrew, Will?
Well, for me, it'd be like you got to find a wall to shoot them, like period.
Yeah.
And they're brand new. I think there's 2 in Toronto. Is it more? There more now, Tim? I don't know. I know
there's very, very few in Canada. Very few in Canada. Sorry, I apologize. Everybody, my cat has decided she wants to jump up on my desk now.
And
there's very few in Canada. Excuse me. There's 2, and they're very, very much focused on this Disney-sized dollars. So it's not accessible to us the mere mortals or anybody else, unfortunately. We are building studios as well. We have several studios that are being built. There is a long wait time to get brand new product at the minute because of the supply and logistics problems within the world. Basically, it doesn't matter what you're doing. So it's just the way it is. But we plan that all out, get it built, get it all, make sure everything's planned for you properly, and do it that way now. So when you're saying, sorry, my cat again is distracting me. Apologies. So when you say about there only been 2 studios, there is going to be more. There is more, and there is more LED out there. It's just that they're not necessarily going up for these huge PR pieces where it's like, look at us and waving all the glitter. They're doing it behind the scenes. They're getting it. We're working with a lot of broadcast companies as well. So within Canada and the US, we have a lot of US projects that are going live very, very soon as well for full studio builds. So there is more stuff out there. LA's absolutely dripping in virtual production sets. But again, there is horror stories there where they've gone in with cheaper LED or the wrong workflow or haven't got their head around what that workflow is. That's the most important thing. And that's what Andrew and his team did was, what's our workflow? This is the workflow. This is how we are successful. We did pre-runs with them with other LED as well that we had prior to bringing in our custom stock. And that's how you do it. So it is a long process. It's not something you just jump into and do next week. You got to have the workflow done. You got to have your content correct, all of the above.
Yeah. And I'll just say I've had conversations with Dell customers, academic customers, university customers who are setting up virtual production stage, much like SIRT. So it is something that's coming and becoming more common. I want to get to the next a couple questions because we're getting a few more coming. So I like this one. If something isn't VFX heavy, would this still be a useful technique? Can you give an example of something you could do?
Yeah, so I mean, there's other options of doing it. If you're not going VFX heavy, so in other words, working with post or a VFX company, I would call that video playback. So video playback, if it's traditional video playback, and I'm sure Andrew's done a lot of this as well, is that you've got to do pre-testing on the LED. You do have to have the right LED, but you can skip out a lot of parts in the middle. You're not going to have camera tracking, for example. It's probably tighter shots. Again, the LED's thrown out of focus in the background. You want to get all those beautiful reflections. Car commercials are really good. A lot of car driving scenes use LED. Like we've been doing LED, on-camera LED for camera stuff, for car stuff for 6 to 8 years. So that we've got a lot of stuff on Amazon and Netflix productions that we've come in from behind the scenes to do as the LED expert. So if that answers the question.
I think it's a great answer. Andrew, I think you had something you wanted to add.
Mentioned cars, yeah, like that's where it kind of really started. It was more about looking, it's poor man's process.
Poor man's process. Yeah,
it was perfect for that, and then you don't need to add the second level. I guess there's 2 tiers of it. So there's poor man's process, and then there's put in motion capture, volumetric tracking in there, and a game engine.
Cool. So one of the most important questions: when's the Survivorman game coming out?
When it's done.
Yeah. We're looking at Q2 or Q3 for next year.
Okay. So. Cool. Well, I think been a very interesting conversation. I want to give an opportunity for the panelists to kind of have a last word, and I think where do you see this going? In a minute or less. What do you think's coming next? And I think Tim, we'll start with you, and we'll go kind of around the horn and finish with Andrew.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's this technology being accessible to more companies that want to get in front of it. It's a sustainable technology. I don't think we use the word sustainable, but that's what we were getting at. You don't have to travel to Italy. You can shoot in Italy one day. You can shoot in England the next. You can shoot wherever you want to shoot, all and do it within a very short window of time by using virtual production and use it, and then creating your assets. That makes it more sustainable, and that's what's more attractive in today's political and whatever else environment you want to call it. What we've seen over the last 2 years, it makes even more sense now to be using virtual production to shoot. So that is the future.
Cool. Will, what do you think?
3D scanning improves and virtual production improves. There'll be this kind of inflection point where you'll be able to use this a lot more readily, and it'll be useful for a lot more things. I think currently it still is such a new thing. It's really specialized, but I could see it being a really useful tool for all kinds of elements of production once it matures a little bit more and once it gets more accessible to everybody. Specifically for something like reshoots, like you don't have to go back to the set necessarily. If you have a good scan of it, you could reshoot, close-ups or like tighter shots in a virtual production, and then cut it into the other footage, and it should should work pretty well. It would save you a lot of time. So there's specific examples like that, but I think that it will be another tool that filmmakers will use more broadly, increasingly from this point onward.
Yeah. And Andrew, what are your thoughts about where the future lies?
Yeah, I'm going to go way out into the future, which is usually not that far. But
Right.
I think that eventually virtual production will be an antiquated dinosaur doing the way we do it with giant walls of TVs. Sorry, Tim. But I think what we're going to be going to, especially with the advances in machine vision, is that the computers can now see the world in full depth, in great detail, and have spatial understanding of it. And AR, augmented reality, will start filling in the virtual production sort of world. So that means that you can now just literally key out the rest of the city and make it a mountain range and put a Sasquatch in the foreground that looks realistic, that can cross over. So I think we're going to something crazy like that.
It's interesting because I think, you know, it's always good to get a good debate going on online. I don't 100% agree. Because and the reason why
that makes a good panel.
That's it, right? Add a bit of spice. Because one of the big things that's attracting the Netflix of this world and so on to virtual production is bringing back the artistry into filmmaking, where you're shooting in real time. So if it goes the direction that you're talking about, that's like elaborate green screen again, where you're not able to the DOP can't react to what's in front of him as he's shooting, and the lighting and everything in real time. So that's the attraction, and that is why the Amazons and the Netflix are specifically getting into it. In fact, one of the top guys from Netflix, that was his exact words. It was bringing back the artistry back into filmmaking for the photographers.
For sure. And then, you know, how does an actor act off of something that they can't see unless they're looking? That is a good point. But I will also add, I remember going to an NAB years ago when Lytro had launched their first depth camera, and they had talked about how you can now, because you can do this now, you can actually go in depth into a photograph and just put in your own new layers in the background. So you can you can change the lighting of a shot, like after the fact. You can change the backgrounds, you can do anything. And after this whole big presentation with this camera the size of a Cadillac, with a processor the size of 2 Cadillacs to run it, someone put their hand up in the audience, and they were very proud to say, like, anybody can change anything, lighting, the color of a tie, the background. And someone put their hand up and said, yeah, but we don't want that. We want, at some point, shit to be locked down so that people can't come in and change it all after the fact.
Awesome. Well, guys, I really appreciate the chance to chat with you about this project and kind of about your thoughts about virtual production. Real pleasure to have the audience here join us and questions. Much appreciated. Enjoy the remainder of Stareable Fest. Hope you have a great time. We're so happy to be co-presenting sponsors with NVIDIA. Andrew, Tim, well, thanks so much for your time.
You can look up SurvivormanVR.com if you wanted to find out more about the game. I think someone had asked a question about that.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.